I'm George Galloway.
I'm Steve Topple.
And we are Topple Galloway. Steve, thousands more people have watched last week's show.
I know.
Because it's free. I mean, when you pay for it, you're paying pennies per show. But thousands have flocked to the show.
They have, haven't
because
they?
It's free. I don't know what that tells
great.
us about us, them, our following. But the feedback's been interesting, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been really good actually. It's been lovely to see. A lot of people have been saying how good the commentary is, how nice it's to see us together, because they quite often hear us on the radio, because we're sometimes on talk radio together, aren't we?
Yeah.
And also there's been comments about our attire.
Attire. I'm apparently the older generation.
Yes.
Suit, waistcoat, tie. Well, no tie, but hat. And you are ripped jeans, they say, and of course, dazzlingly hip.
Yes.
And people are saying, well, that's two generations, but the same politics.
Exactly. I think when we set out to do this, that's kind of a conversation we had, really, wasn't it? That, the point was that you've got yourself one generation and myself another generation, and to sort of bring the two together with similar but sometimes different political views, and then see what comes out of the mix.
But don't tell the wife, she thinks I'm 45. Now, the first story has to be Boris Johnson. It was said of Sir Christopher Soames MP, who's quite a thin man now, but was once, well, not quite thin. It was said by one of his former wives that having sex with him was like having a wardrobe fall on top of you with a key sticking out of it. With that image in mind, has Boris Johnson fallen on one too many hapless damsels now in distress?
With that image in mind, you expect me to forget that image, for starters. Has he? Well, look, I mean, we kind of make a joke out of Boris because he is a bit of a sort of buffoon type character. But
he might be the next Prime Minister.
And this is the thing, and it is funny to sort of rip to shreds out of him. But in all seriousness, he's quite a dangerous man. He encapsulates that Etonian kind of breed that we've seen over the years from certain factions of the Conservative Party, which is that adultery is acceptable among their class, that racism is acceptable among their class, and how someone like him should even be allowed to be a politician, let alone Prime Minister, I don't know, because I mean he's a serial adulterer, isn't he?
Well, he's a serial adulterer, a man who impregnates other people's wives.
Yes.
Refuses to take responsibility for the issue thus produced. But that's just on one level. On another level, political level, you're right. His crimes on a social level are even greater than that, because he wants to do it to all of us.
Yes.
He is a man, a sociopath in my view.
I think so, yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to avidly follow Billy Bunter books. Now, Billy Bunter, I was a poor working class council house kid. Billy Bunter was an upper class public school boy at a boarding school, Greyfriars, I think it was called. And there were tuck shops, there were food fights, there were pillow fights, there were cads, bounders, mountebanks. All of which actually could be used to describe Boris Johnson. In another era, he would have been horsewhipped by the father of one of the women that he has wronged.
He might well have been horsewhipped, but that might be one of the women.
And horsewhipping, who knows, public school and all that might be something that he enjoys. But perhaps we're getting into two dark corners here. The point is, Johnson's long record of racism, of classism, remember his shameful attacks on the people of Liverpool, for which even he had to apologise in print. He has attacked just about everywhere and everybody in the world, and yet this barrage balloon keeps on rising.
Yes.
For all this flurry of, you would have thought, extremely bad publicity, his chances of being in Downing Street before Christmas, before Easter, certainly before next summer holidays, are probably gathering steam.
They are, and I mean that, and it's a ridiculous thought when you think about it. It's staggering that in this country, firstly, we have that class of people, as I referred to before, this Etonian breed who are so disconnected from the rest of society, and yet they think they're somehow superior. Quite often these people are educated beyond their intelligence, which I think Boris Johnson is an example of. I mean, he studied classics, didn't he? And, which is all well and good.
Yeah, I mean, he can drop the odd classicist rhetoric into his classist speeches.
And indeed, and there's an argument to be made for the distinction between being intelligent and being an intellectual, and Boris Johnson could be called an intellectual, but you can't necessarily call him intelligent. However, what he does do very well, and it's why I think people underestimate him, he's extremely savvy with his media persona. I believe he knows exactly what he's doing, presenting this bumbling fool image, if you like, that's kind of ingratiates him to certain sections of society. And as I say, it's a terrifying thought that he could be Prime Minister, but moreover, the press are partly guilty for this sort of emancipation of Boris from every crisis, not least because we see him constantly referred to as Boris now. They don't even call him Johnson, which as a journalist, the standard procedure in any article you write is you refer to the person as their full name first, which you'll know, and then afterwards it's their last name. That's a standard sort of journalistic format, but he's known as Boris, which kind of gives him something a bit personified and a bit cuddly and a bit
Now,
nice.
here's a conundrum, Steve. I see countless pictures of him running, jogging, cycling, playing tennis, pulverizing small Asian children on foreign visits.
Rugger, wasn't it, I think? Yeah.
He's a man of action, yet he seems to grow ever fatter. How does that work? How do you do that much exercise?
It's the port, isn't it? It's probably the port.
Maybe stuffing his face in the tuck shop. No, I just see it as one of the mysteries of our age. I've never seen a politician being pictured out jogging more.
No.
And I've scarcely seen a politician who was fatter and flabbier.
Indeed.
But you know, this man, he had 2 terms as Mayor of London. He's had 2 parliamentary seats, though ironically, Mrs. May has just published boundary commission reviews, and hey, guess who loses their seats?
That's interesting.
Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson.
Indeed.
It was number 10 that leaked the dossier on his personal life.
They've denied it, though, I have to say, for fairness. They've outright denied that there was anything.
They've denied leaking it, but they haven't denied producing it.
No.
Because they can't. It was produced by Theresa May's 2 top aides at the time. But they've no idea how it suddenly got out, how it suddenly escaped from his computer and ended up on the front pages of
dossier running like that. Carry on.
The newspapers. They're clearly very worried about him.
Yeah, I think so.
Because Mrs. May, whatever else you say about Boris Johnson, Mrs. May is robotic and personality free compared to him. So my thinking is, the Tory view is, it's a risk going with Boris Johnson as leader. But there's no risk involved in keeping Theresa May. We're done for. There's not even a risk in that. She cannot win a general election. So do they replace her with another desiccated calculating machine? Or do they replace her with someone who might well not work, but on the other hand, could just capture the zeitgeist with a tame Tory press behind them?
I think so. I think you're right. I mean, the boundary review itself, which is another topic altogether. I mean, the Tories, if that was in their charge, would have always loaded it in their favour anyway. But that's sort of one assertion. And also, what's interesting about boundary review as a side note is that the Tories are going to lose their seats. Are all arch Eurosceptics, aren't they? It's Boris Johnson, Priti Patel, Ian Duncan Smith, all these sort of real Eurosceptics that are linked to the European Research Group. Campaign, so there's that, and as we...
Well, if you believe that the Boundary Commission is neutral, let me tell you that when Tony Blair expelled me from the Labour Party in 2003. His boundary commission abolished my constituency a few months later, just in case I should
Just a coincidence.
just in case I should try and make a comeback.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson, the Tories, big story, but not quite as big as the Labour one.
Call off the dogs!
Who let the dogs out?
Call off the dogs! Chuka uttered this week in the ongoing Labour coup / anti-Semitism crisis / saga / soap opera. It's descending from the sublime to the ridiculous. We've had no confidence motions being thrown around left, right and centre, and as I so eloquently introduced, we've had Chuka referring to Corbyn supporters as dogs. So it's gone from trots to a rabble to
Trots,
dogs.
rabble, dogs.
Trots, rabble, dogs. It's just, we could talk about this every week, couldn't we, really? It's kind of, it's an ongoing
It might be
thing.
reaching the denouement now, though. I mean, there's no real way back for Chuka now, is there?
He done it.
Didn't, in the same weekend, he called Corbyn supporters dogs,
Yep.
but he also doubled down on his claim that Labour is institutionally racist. And I think if in one weekend you make both of those attacks, it probably means you're on your way out the door.
Absolutely. I mean, Diane Abbott and Clive Lewis came out in vocal support of Corbyn over the weekend, didn't they? They sort of admonished Umuna for his comments. But yeah, I think he has to be. It's just preposterous. I mean, the thing is as well, even from an unbiased standpoint with regards to scrutinising Umuna's comments, none of them stand up. I mean, this is the first time he's ever said this, institutionally racist. I mean, Corbyn's been in for nearly 3 years now. There's a YouGov poll being bandied around on Twitter, which I haven't verified, I'd like to say, but people like Squawkbox have been sharing it, which says that Jewish people felt more comfortable under Corbyn than they did under Ed Miliband, less likely to leave the country, I think was the thrust of it. But there's this...
15% less likely
yes, that's the one.
to leave the country. Of course, we hope and pray that none of them leave the country. And if you want my prediction, none of them will. No. No, I think Chuka has raised the stakes, as they would say in his very expensive gentleman's club, where I presume they play poker.
He likes garage music, apparently.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I saw a picture of him nursing a glass of brandy, the bottle of which cost £4,000.
Oh, I remember
So
that.
his suits cost thousands of pounds. He told us that in GQ magazine when he was their poster boy, when he was their cover boy. So he's not really a man of the people. I lived in Streatham, his constituency, for nearly 20 years. Trust me, not many people in Streatham are going to vote for him.
No, I
as
know
an
people in
independent.
Streatham as well.
So the Labour coup may very well soon be the Labour exit from the party. I'm sure that Chuka intends to be the leader, because when I look around these so-called rebels, he's the only one that's got anything about him at all. I mean, who else is going to be the leader? Yvette Cooper.
She's been there, done that, hasn't she? Attempted to.
Wes Streeting.
Yep.
You've only got to roll out these names and see how
Jess
visible
Phillips.
they are. Jess Phillips probably fancies herself if no one else does. So I think Chuka will be the leader. I think he's the new Blair. Kind of even looks a bit like Blair. Follically challenged Blair. And this may very well happen quite quickly. The Labour conference is only, a week,
Just
10
over,
days away. And what happens at the Labour conference will presumably be a series of provocations by these people to make the the conference as chaotic as possible.
I think so. Yeah, I think if you're viewing it as an outsider, which I will be, the Labour conference, because as I repeatedly say, I'm not a Labour supporter, I'm not a Labour member, I'm not a Corbyn supporter, even though people accuse me of it. It'll be a get the popcorn moment watching it, because it's going to be fascinating to see how the two factions, if you like, are going to interact at this conference, more so than the previous 2 years where Corbyn's been leader. What's interesting about the situation with the Munna, from my point of view, because I researched this a lot several years ago, his thinking as a politician, he's not really a Blairite as such, is he? He's something, he wrote a lot and supported a lot, a notion called Blue Labour. Have you heard of that? Yeah, Blue Labour. It's founded by Maurice Glassman in 2009.
No, Lord Glassman.
Oh, is he a Lord? Well, Lord Glassman, whatever the hell that means. Founded by Maurice Glassman. John Cruddas was a sort of proponent of it as well, and so was
Munna.
I don't know, it's weird, isn't it? Yeah. Well, as did this Blue Labour sort of notion. It kind of came and then it influenced Ed Miliband's thinking slightly, and then we haven't really heard anything from it since. But Chuka was a big proponent of Blue Labour, which is basically, it was left-wing economics coupled with right-wing social thinking. Their sort of tag was faith, family and flag, and the idea was that you'd kind of break the kind of UKIP control over certain working class communities by appealing sort of with nationalist policies, if you like, tough on immigration, be proud of your country, but also with left-wing economics. And Chuka was very big on this, so it'd be interesting to see how his school of thought politically marries with the others around him, if you like, in this breakaway union.
Well, don't expect consistency,
no.
Steve, because he's capable of facing many ways at the same time. He, for example, voted for changes to the now famous IHRA definition of anti-Semitism because the original definitions would be ruinous for free speech. And by the way, that was only 12 months ago. He has, as you say, never in all these 20 years he's been in the Labour Party ever accused it before of being institutionally racist. And now, when it's got all these people of different races in it and at the top in it, he chooses this moment to call it institutionally racist. But I'll tell you why you shouldn't expect consistency, because the leitmotif of this new formation is love of the European Union. And therefore, flags, patriotism, love your country and so on, they're so very last year.
That's a very good
for
point.
them. And the money, the big money, £50 million already pledged to this new party. And then George Soros's money, no doubt bringing up the rear. This is all pro-EU money. This is all money being expended to either stop Britain leaving the EU, or if it must leave, then keeping it as close as possible under the purview of the EU. So expect Chuka to be the Remainer-in-Chief if he's the leader of this new party.
Yeah, I take your comment on that, definitely. I think it's going to be fascinating. I mean, more broadly as well, I think we had a comment from a viewer, didn't we? Kevin Mullins. Hello, Kevin. Thank you.
Hi, Kevin. Yeah, thanks for everything.
He said that he spoke to someone, a friend in a pub the other week after watching our show and talking about the anti-Semitism crisis. And the person in the pub he spoke to said, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that, but not really. No one's really talking about it in my world." I'm paraphrasing here. But he also said they must hate Corbyn a lot to keep rolling this out.
Yeah, I mean, I've said all along that this anti-Semitism row was a bubble issue. Doesn't make it a non-issue.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean the bubble itself isn't important as a battleground, but it's a bubble issue.
Yeah.
On the streets of Cleethorpes or Colchester, up in Arbroath, in South Wales, people have got much bigger, more serious issues to worry about than whether someone spoke rudely to someone called Ruth Smith.
I think so, and I think on that note, some people have got more important things to worry about as well, as to whether Chuka thinks Corbyn supporters are dogs or not.
Woof! Woof! Well, the Swedish general election has come and gone amid a lot of panic in the international media. The far right, formerly overtly fascist party has put its vote up by 4 points. It's not exactly world transforming, but it is nonetheless significant. 19%, almost therefore 1 in 5 of Swedish people voted for an explicitly far-right party. Mind you, the left also increased its vote, as did the Greens. And in fact, the far-right will not be going into government after all, as many pundits were predicting. My view, Steve, is that the blame is being put on the wrong people for the rise of such parties in Sweden and in Germany. In France, they already were big, although Mélenchon on the left is becoming bigger than them. The blame lies with the centrist politicians whose stewardship of events and of the economy and of the immigration system and all the other things they've stewarded has been found completely wanting. And what's happening is that in Britain, where people are going left, in Sweden, where 1 in 5 are going right, in Germany, where about 1 in 5 are going right, what's happening is a rejection of the status quo, a rejection of the prevailing orthodoxy.
Indeed, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the press's reaction and the commentariat's reaction to the Swedish elections has been one of shock horror, like this sort of the dissolving of politics as we know it, of the centre-left and the centre-right sort of running the show, if you like, as if it's some sort of shock, as if it's come out of nowhere. Not that this has actually been happening for years, and there was always a natural consequence of decades of the same system with the same people in charge running things. I think it's just a natural progression. Look, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's a problem of the centre, not a problem of the far right or a problem of the far left. I think it's come from post-2008 financial crisis, but also it's come from sort of late 70s onwards, the rise of what we call neoliberalism, but other people call capitalism, the sort of rise of that, and people realising after decades that it doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
And
what's in it for me?
Yeah, exactly. And that it doesn't work. So it's not a surprise. What concerns me, and it concerned me when it happened 2 weeks ago, especially in Germany, is the emboldened nature of the far right, if you like. I mean, we discussed this privately off camera.
And also we discussed it on camera with the EDL Tommy Robinson thing on the streets of London.
Yeah, it's the emboldening of the far right. I mean, to the point where in Germany a couple of weeks ago, the far right were openly doing Nazi salutes, which is illegal in Germany. And for that to be happening in Germany is quite something, that people are openly doing that. But yeah, I agree with you. It's a problem of the centrist politics. But what's the solution to it, is the question.
Well, I mean, this partly ties in with Britain and Brexit and so on. So-called freedom of movement is in fact the freedom of employers to import cheap labour, to pay them directly cheap labour, but also indirectly to therefore pay everybody else cheap labour. Because the pressure on wages of a reserve labour pool is obviously a downward pressure on wages, which is very good for employers. And by the way, I was thinking when you were just talking there, fascism in Germany in 1933 came to power because the ruling elite, who were not fascists, saw some utility in having this far-right fascism as a front end of the defense of their system. And the same thing could be happening now, because I've been wondering, why did the media give the Swedish fascists such enormous publicity, which wasn't, as I say, then borne out at the ballot box? Their vote went up 4%. That's not a bad increase, but it's hardly earth-shattering. It's certainly not going to shatter Sweden. So having in reserve shock troops of the far right is, you don't have to look in the crystal ball, you can look in the history book, is a tactic of capitalism.
Of course,
that fascism might have to be reverted to if they're going to forestall what they regard as something worse. I may say that German capitalists, having backed Hitler, had plenty of years to regret it. Some of them, not all of them, some of them profited mightily. But what the solution is, an end to neoliberalism, an end to austerity, an end to the endless shredding of community, because that's what's really happening. The problem in Sweden is not that there's a lot of foreigners. The problem is that in Sweden, even Sweden and Germany, two rich Northern European countries, the sense of community is being shredded. And that's a very dangerous thing. And it's happened here also. And we need a state, a government and a state that's working to bring people together, not facilitating directly and indirectly their falling apart. I don't think that the Swedish people, though, by the way, Sweden and Denmark had large Nazi contingents in the Second World War. There is something Nordically fascist about the ideas of whiteness, of blondness, of Aryanness. That's present in the political genes in Scandinavia, even though social democracy has ruled the roost there for decades. But if people don't feel a stake in the society they're in, they're going to blame Johnny Foreigner, somebody who doesn't look like them, sound like them, eat like them, dress like them, and then this spiral downwards happens.
I again broadly agree with all your points, especially about free movement of people. It's been bastardized by the progressive, if you like, as something wonderful.
People say it as if it's a liberal thing.
Yeah, of course. If you do your research, anyone knows that it was designed by the European Union to take cheap labour from the south up to the west and northern industrialised countries when the EU was first formed. It's a misnomer to say that it's progressive and wonderful and that we can all go and study abroad. And that's
well, it's good that we can study abroad.
No, for sure.
And it's good that we can visit abroad. I would love 50 million Europeans to come here for their holidays. But if 50 million Europeans come here and have the right to work here, live here, go to the doctor here, use all the public services here for as long as they like, the result's going to be trouble.
Well, they are, unless, of course, you invest more in public services.
Well, if my auntie had a beard, she'd be my uncle. Although we're on Patreon, I can say if my auntie had balls, she'd be my uncle. We've not got a government that is going to invest in public services. And, moreover, the European Union does not allow you to run the kind of budget deficit that would be required to build enough houses, hospitals, schools, clinics, and all the things that the mass influx of East European labour had caused the demand for. So you're kind of done on both fronts. But there's another issue. Maybe we'll disagree on this. If all the most mobile, most energetic, most talented, best educated people leave Bulgaria and come to Britain, what happens to Bulgaria? Why should Bulgaria become a basket case because British capitalism can pay £7 an hour to a Bulgarian, whilst in Bulgaria they're only earning £1?
I don't disagree with you on that point either. I think, I think the problems across Europe with the rise of the far right are, as you say, a centrist problem. I think it stems from neoliberalism or capitalism, or as I prefer, corporatism. Whatever you want to call it, it's one and the same thing. It's a lot of people suffering because of the greed of a few people, ultimately. I think I agree with you in part on free movement of people. I've never been a fan of it. And I think your point about if all the good people, if all the extremely qualified people come from somewhere like Bulgaria, then what for Bulgaria? I think it's a logical point to make. I think the solution to it, this is where there's a bit of a stumbling block, if you like, because the solution for it in this country anyway, in 2015 we looked like we were going down the route of lots of different parties with lots of different ideas, and then come the 2017 election we were smack bang back to a two-party state again.
But whether that was because Corbyn made the Labour Party something different.
Possibly, or it could have been that people had Brexit in their minds,
Maybe.
and that it was more of a choice between two definite ways of doing Brexit.
If your two parties are two cheeks of the same arse, people are going to want to kick it. If your two parties are actually genuinely different,
Two different arses.
well, I wouldn't call Labour an arse because I was in it for a long time, but you get my point.
Yeah.
If there is a real choice in the pre-existing political dichotomy, people will make that choice. But if the choice is Tweedledee or Tweedledum, why shouldn't people boot it right up the arse?
No, absolutely. I mean, and again, I agree with you broadly on that. I don't think the two-party system in this country has had a full resurgence, because if you look at the number of people who don't vote, we have a serious democratic deficit.
There's also an ongoing nationalist challenge to the existence of the British state.
My concern is with Corbyn's Labour, and this is a brief but a point I probably should expand on at some point, is that his policies are very like the Nordic model in a lot of respects, aren't they? I mean, we're talking workers on committees, we're talking high-level collective bargaining, nationalisation of service, massive public spending. That's quite Nordic in its model. And my only concern is that, is Corbyn as radical as we think, and is it enough to stop, say, the rise of the far right in this country?
Because I think that's a brilliant question. We will have to deal with it at more depth and length on another occasion. But I'm here to tell you, as someone who was a full-time Labour organiser at the time, that Harold Wilson, a centrist Labour figure as you could get by the time he was in power, ran on a manifesto in the two elections of 1974, which was far more left-wing than Jeremy Corbyn's. So it's not easy to see why the capitalist class and its media are panicking so much about Jeremy Corbyn. He's just a Nordic sort of guy. He even looks Nordic.
It slightly does, yes, indeed. But it's going to be fascinating to watch. But I think you're correct. There's fault of the rise of the far right lies in the centrists, and Chuka and Munna, that includes you as well. So.
Woof, woof. We've been Topple Galloway.
We have been Topple Galloway, and we hope you enjoyed the show this week, which is free to view at the minute. It's free to view throughout the whole of September. That means you can catch it on both our YouTube channels. That means you can catch it on Facebook. You can still catch it on Patreon, and you can catch it quickly when you're scrolling through your Twitter timelines. So please do watch, and please do comment, because we like you getting involved. We love to hear what people are saying, don't we, George? So get involved with us. Tweet us if you want. It's at Mr. Topple or at George Galloway. Until next week. Yeah, woof, woof. See you next week. Woof. Just one more thing. In 2016 and 2017, the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities issued two scathing reports into successive UK governments and the Department for Work and Pensions. These included accusing the UK government of creating a human catastrophe for disabled people by committing grave, quote, and systematic, quote, violations of disabled people's human rights. They also accused the UK government of trying to cover its tracks through a smokescreen of statistics and misuse of statements. Now, 12 months on, the UK government finally issued its response to the UN CRPD, as it's known, last week. The response was an absolute joke. It was a disgrace. They whitewashed both UN reports, they ignored the recommendations, and they claimed in their fairy tale world that everything was just going grand for disabled people. It was an absolutely disgusting moment in this country's history, but you know what was more disgusting? None of the media even reported on it except me. So I'd urge you all at home to check out thecanary.co and look up UNCRPD and the Department for Work and Pensions, because people need to know what has gone on in this country.
Just one more thing. This is the anniversary of 9/11/2001. As always, we bow our heads in remembrance for the thousands of people who were slain in one of the worst terrorist attacks ever mounted anywhere in the world. We remember the heroism of the firefighters and the police officers and the emergency responders. But sadly, we have to remember something else too. In the next few days, maybe in the next few hours, Britain and America and France are about to go back to war in Syria as the air force of Al-Qaeda, the people who flew the aeroplanes into the Twin Towers and killed all these people. Britain and America and Al-Qaeda. Just think about that.